make bigger rules, have bigger consequences, all those things. So we're putting pressure on the child for this to morph. Even as a child psychologist, for the last 12 years of my career, I haven't worked with children because our way through for the child is us. And when we can really understand that if we can get that foundation piece sorted out, everything else will fall into place.
Welcome back to the Jai Empowered Parenting Speaker Series. I'm really grateful today to be speaking with Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, who many of you know from her wisdom and the concise way, I think, Vanessa, that you explain parenting in a way that feels very actionable for parents. And one of the things I appreciate about you most is there's never any shame in the way that you're speaking to people. And I'm sure that's, a result of the nature of your background as a psychologist and working with so many families and understanding that. And I appreciate that you share our mission to support children to journey through childhood and their teen years into adulthood with secure attachment, with a trust-based relationship with their caregivers, their parents, other people who are supporting them in their journey, which means that as parents, we get to learn, unlearn, and relearn a different way of thinking about parenting. And so in our world, there's all these words: conscious parenting, peaceful parenting, intentional parenting, gentle parenting. And I would really love for you to give your definition of what that is and maybe is not.
Yeah, that's such a great introduction. And I struggle with all of those words, probably the same way that you do, because there's not a single one of them that actually captures the essence of what I know you all are about and what also I speak about. And I've almost started calling it like conscious developmental attachment parenting.
Cat, cat, but
And because there's kind of three parts to it. One is to be really aware of and understanding of the role of attachment and why relationship is the foundation for everything to do with healthy child development. Connected to that, we also need to be aware of development. So often our struggles as parents is because we're watching behaviors that our children are engaging in or watching the way they're sort of wandering through life. And we have judgment about that, mostly because we don't understand development. The 2-year-olds are meant to bite. That doesn't make them bad humans. They're just little 2-year-olds figuring out the world. And right now they're chewing on it, and so to not make our children wrong for being children. And then the third part is the conscious part. And that was the part that eluded me as a mother for so long. I couldn't figure out why I could know all of the things up here, but not be able to live those things out in the essence of my being and how I was coming into different moments with my own children. And so understanding that we parent as we were parented, that children always express what is between and also what is behind. And that if we are unaware of how those subconscious programs are actually running our lives, that you can be all the things attachment wise and all the things development wise. But if you don't have that understanding layered in terms of the role of consciousness, you'll feel a lot like you're just like banging your head against a brick wall.
Yeah, to me, that would create a lot of inconsistency and almost feeling like I can kind of put myself back there. Like I couldn't trust myself. I didn't know which version of me was going to show up that day to my child. I'm really curious. I think our work is 100% parent centric here at the Jai Institute for Parenting. We don't talk about how to raise children or how to get children to behave. And I'm always so moved by the courage and the bravery that it takes a parent to say, I'm not living up to my best self. I see myself acting in these ways that I know are causing separation or breaking trust with my children. Does everyone have feeling like are there ways that people can make that kind of self-awareness feel less like we need to defend it? Like we have these moments of insight, and then it's like, oh, defense mechanism comes up, and I'm not going to look at that, and oh my gosh, if my kid hadn't thrown the block, I wouldn't have acted that way.
Right. I mean, I think the challenge is that it's an elusive connection, like that we are radically accountable to our own behavior, and that our accountability to whatever programs and triggers and things get stirred up inside of us, that we don't get to blame that on our children. There's something about, if you point your finger at someone else, you got three fingers pointing back at you. There's something about taking that finger back and being like, oh, I'm going to step in and stand up, and not going down the shame blame cycle of, feeling like a terrible parent and you're going to be better, and that if I'm the one that has to change, then it must have all been my fault that my child's struggling, or that this isn't feeling like it's going the way that it's meant to go. I think the more that we can normalize the human experience of being a parent, which is to find, maybe not words that you wanted to be speaking falling out of your mouth, and to be like really humbled by how intense that can be for all of us. Um, the more we talk about it, the more we can make sense of how all of us journey, that those programs are part of what we are. I love to come back to this foundational concept as well of we're all innocent. Like every single one of us at the core are innocent in the journey. And then stuff happens, and it gets tricky, and we onboard these sort of like ego behaviors. But we didn't, it's not like you were born and on the day you were born, you were like, you know what? One day I'm going to grow up and become a parent who's like super yelly shouty. Like nobody intends for that. It just occurs because of how life works. And so welcome to the club of being human. And wouldn't it be wonderful if instead of this being something that makes us feel ashamed, this could be something that makes us empowered, that we have this sense of like agency around how we can do this thing, and that there is a way to sort of clear a path with hope as our guide, that we can and will find our way through.
One of the ways that I worry that the pendulum has swung a little bit too far is almost the opposite, right? Where everything my child does is my fault. I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
And they can do no wrong
Mm-hmm.
because we live in a very interesting time. And yes, we want to bring children, build them up and teach them skills and build their integrity and their personal discipline and all these things that will help them lead a fulfilling life. um, I'm curious, the topic of this conversation today is around conscious discipline, because from my point of view, I want my children to be securely attached to me, and it is also my responsibility to teach them how to function in the world and live up to their responsibilities. And yes, I have high expectations, which I know, shoot me now. um, and this is confusing, right? Like on the one hand, my behavior is my responsibility, and also in a way my child's behavior is also my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about conscious discipline, and
Yeah.
maybe just start by defining it.
Yeah. Conscious discipline is not going to be about finding your child behaving well and reinforcing that. Conscious discipline is going to be about finding yourself behaving well, about understanding why it gets wobbly sometimes, why we struggle to hang on to our own selves, and also trusting the power of child development.
Mhm.
I can't think what story this comes from, but it's the idea of, as parents, we're meant to launch the arrow. Like it's our job to launch it, and it's our children's job to, find their mark, to
Mm.
fly the way they want to fly, to live the way they feel is resonant to their being, and and for us consciously to just be leaning into all of those dynamics, knowing that the universe is at our back, and all of us get to grow when we get to do that. So it isn't about, your kid does this, then you should do this, then your kid will do this, and then like put a check mark in the box. Instead, it's about understanding how we journey and finding our way forward in discipline with those principles at the forefront of all of it.
One of our trainers shared at one point, and I don't think this is hers, she found it somewhere else, but when we think about the word discipline, the root is disciple, which means to teach. And for any of us, right? Like if you think about people in your life that taught you something, that you trust enough that when they offer advice or their opinion, because you're open to it and have given consent, that how that would feel on the one hand if it was someone who was yelling and shutting down your behavior and not interested in your point of view or what was happening for you, versus someone who was curious enough to go under the behavior and then use that calm,
Mm,
trust-based safe space to create a new way forward.
yeah.
uh, that's kind of how I've come to see it, right? So it's not that um, I'm going to talk, I've had teenagers in the house for the last 6 years, right? There's been some hard conversations, there's been
Yeah.
some scary
Mhm.
situations,
Mm,
and they needed to be addressed, but they needed to be addressed in a way that my kids knew that I had their back and that we were in this together.
yeah. Yeah. Which is pretty remarkable. It's such a different way at coming at things. And when it's partly, so that root word disciple, to teach, and we can think about that really concretely. And part of it also is that there's, certain moments where there will be explicit teaching happening. And then there's a lot of other moments where the teaching is implicit. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. Where it's not what you tell them with your words that is what is being onboarded. It's the experience, it's the feeling, it's the modeling, it's the marinating in all of that energy. And then how is that literally shaping the neural architecture of the brain, and also the narrative of the soul, and how do those two things come together from that point?
I
Mm,
love that so much. It's we see evidence of this every day. When parents' behavior shifts, children's behavior transforms.
mhm,
And it can be very scary, right? Like we have been conditioned to believe that our job as parents is to control our child, to control their behavior, to control their life choices. um, I love that there are more and more of us, and love what you said about, it's the child's job to have their own agency, right? And to
mm,
go find their own path with our support and not our.
mm,
We see, this happening all the time. It's like the root of our work here at the Giant Institute for Parenting is really about personal growth and development and emotional maturation in adults. Can you talk about kids' brains and why that actually is a far more effective tool than traditional strategies, timeouts, consequences that are doled out versus allowed to play out, I would say. Um, why is that? What happens in their brain when we live into this idea that the first place to look for more discipline is within ourselves?
beautifully said. Yeah. So, I think about, what does it mean to be a child? And by definition, part of that is that your brain isn't fully formed yet. You are a whole human. So not to take away the essence of who the child is, and they are still on the path of growing their mind, their brain, and they're also still on the path of figuring out how do they mesh with the world. And for a long time, we've been very child-centric, and we, the royal we, in the parenting world, very child-centric and what that's all about. And when you can take a step back and understand that children do not grow in isolation, children are growing in an environment, the primary presence of which is created by us, the grown-ups. And so, how are we filling that environment energetically and otherwise that our children are then at the effect of, as far as what they're onboarding in terms of messaging and the ability of the human brain to, be dysregulated and feel stressed and be overwhelmed and then come back down to calm. What is it that we are creating experientially for our children? So that is their recurrent experience, that they have somebody available on the outside, that they can kind of hang on to our nervous system and be like, hey, can I just hitch a ride for a minute here? Because I'm really having a hard go. And that we will co-regulate through the dance of relationship and through the dance of connection and understanding. For us to be available to that co-regulatory loop with relationship as the foundation, we need to not be flipping our lids and really having our own difficult time. If that's the nervous system that our children are going to hitch a ride with, then they will be what they see. And so if we're like not okay, then our kids are going to be not okay. And when you can maintain a bit of, I don't want to say control, I don't love the vibration of that word, when you can maintain a sense of self, when you can come home to self, when you can be present in the now, in all of your swaggerful energy as a grown-up in the presence of your child, then your child gets to be like, okay, so I don't have to work at that. That one's good. And they can now rest into the experience of the relationship. And when they're resting into that, there's literally like a connection formed. And that connection is what allows them access to your nervous system so that co-regulatory loop can be alive and well. That connection also makes it very easy for your child to follow your lead and for them to rest into the experience of being guided by you. Because with the connection, which is formed by the relationship, when you move, they come with you and they actually desire to come with you. And so it creates this context that actually makes child raising very easy because there's no battle
Right, nothing to fight.
either way.
Yeah, I love that. I really love the way that you just broke that down. It really comes to our ability to communicate
Yes.
and our willingness to allow our children to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. And for everybody to be seen and heard in that experience, understanding it's not our child's job to see and hear us, but it is our job to see and hear our child. And it's also our job to see and hear ourselves. So when things are stormy and feeling a bit bumpy, to really go inside, to not outsource that. You behave better, so then I feel better, but to go inside and to address like what's happening here. So now I feel better, and the world outside will reflect the world inside. It sounds, I mean, I remember when I was first introduced to the concept of conscious parenting, and I was like, what? But what do you do? Like what actually happens? So wait, I'm just gonna like love myself and sort my programs out and my kids are gonna be happy? Like that's how And it wasn't until, as a mother myself,
Hmm.
I really wandered into the nitty-gritty experience of that for myself. When my family was restructuring and I was going through a really challenging time, and I knew something was off, but I couldn't figure it out. And at that point, I already had a doctoral degree under my belt in psychology. And I was like, wait, am I not supposed to know this? Like, how come? How come nobody's ever spoken about this before?
I know,
And
same, Vanessa. It's very disorienting when you're like, I went to school for this for a really long time and I want to strangle my own children.
yes, yes. And it's like disorienting. I had so much shame about it. Like I was like, oh my gosh, people hire me to stand on stages
Yeah.
and like tell them how this is supposed to work
Yeah,
and guide them on how to lead their children. And things in my own home were a complete disaster zone.
absolutely.
Um, and so really making sense of that for myself. And to be fair, I will continue to make sense of that for myself till the moment I take my last breath. It's not like I figured it out, like I did my 5 years and I figured it out or whatever. And that it is such a powerful, powerful way of understanding who we are, who our children are. And if you want to live abundantly, like overflowing joy, overflowing peace, all of those kinds of things, the only way is to connect this with this. And the pathway for that to happen is through consciousness.
Yeah. Mindfulness, self-awareness,
Mm.
radical self-inquiry, as my coach likes to say. One of the, actually, I want to share this here because it feels really pertinent to what you're saying. So my coach is Jerry Colonna. He's amazing. He's a Buddhist. He's in Colorado. He asks a question: how have you been complicit in the conditions you say you don't want?
I love it.
And it's just a way, like when we start getting into the this is happening and oh my gosh, this one and this is like, okay, wait, I've got this anchor question, right? How have what is my part in this? And when
Mhm.
I can notice that and shift it, things seem to just, it's like the sea settles down.
Yeah.
Things just calm down. I want to go back to one thing that you said, which
Hmm.
is that it is not our children's responsibility to see and hear us, because every parent on the planet, like their number one question, I don't know if you get this too, is my kids don't listen to me. How do I make them listen? And so you said that, and I was like, I could just feel people being like, wait, huh? What? So what did you mean?
Well, one of the things that my teacher says all the time is the only reason that anybody ever opens their mouth and speaks is for the experience of being seen and heard. And I also understand relationship between parents and children as being hierarchically organized. And I don't mean that in a yucky power way, but in a really loving, caring way. That there's our children need to feel like they can just like lean into
Got that.
that and be cared for in that cocoon as they are, getting ready to head out into the world and do as they do. And so, in that hierarchical ordering, we are the caretakers of the dynamic of the relationship. We are the ones that nurture it. We are the ones that repair it. We are the ones that, make it right when things have gone off the rails. Like we're the ones at the helm of that relationship. Our children don't owe us anything. They don't need to see and hear you. They don't need to make your life easy. They don't need to be grateful that they were born. Like they don't owe us anything. Our job is to ensure we have fully seen and heard them. And you don't have to be perfect. Like nature's not a fool. Our babies are not born so sensitive that we wreck them when we have like a tricky moment as a parent. And when we see and hear them, what will happen is our children will go and grow and eventually become capable, not right out the gates, but eventually of seeing and hearing others. And it's not that we aren't looking, it's not that we're just going to release them to the flowery meadows and be like, okay, best of luck to you.
Yeah,
So there
I
will
mean,
be.
that's equally problematic.
Hugely problematic. In
Mhm.
fact, very unsettling for children to just be, released to the flowery meadows. Um, there needs to be a safekeeping, and the safekeeping comes from rules and norms and expectations and boundaries that are lovingly put in place and that are firmly but kindly held.
Yeah.
So it's not that your kids don't ever listen to you. It's just that we're not pushing and driving that. We are allowing for it to be tended to through the dynamics of the relationship.
I like this so much because I think some of the confusion around power over, power under, power with, right, which is something we
Mhm.
talk about a lot, um, has this way of making someone believe like, oh, my child and I are on equal footing. I really think about it as leadership, right? Like
Mm.
there's so many parallels between raising children and growing a business, right? In my life, I am the leader of both of those things. I don't have a parenting partner. So it's me. So how do we hold leadership? So then the question becomes, how do we hold leadership in a way that honors with dignity and and humility, right? Like I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. What can we come up with together, right? That's conscious leadership. And I just love what you just shared because it kind of made it okay to step into that, right? We're not doing it wrong when we take responsibility for the things that we are indeed responsible for. It makes things a lot
Exactly.
easier.
Yes. Yeah. If we could all do that every day, like imagine the amount of grindiness that just like falls away, when we can just lean into that truth. I love that.
Yeah. It's really driven by our values.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think for for this conversation around this idea of discipline, and maybe let's talk about this. There's a lot of hypervigilant parenting going on, a lot of over parenting going on. That's
Mm-hmm.
not new. That's been happening forever. Um, can you give some practical tools or tips to discern, right? Like when is this a good time to just like let it be? And when is it time for me to come in and put in some safety bumpers or set some
Yeah.
expectations or limits?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of that will depend on what your expectations and limits are. Most homes, we're talking about that, like we can't hurt people, we can't hurt our stuff, um, and I won't let you hurt yourself. And as sort of like our baseline, and then everything kind of flows from there. There are times, even when a child is maybe crossing one of those boundaries, where it would actually be appropriate for you as a parent to be like, nope, I'm not stepping in. And that would be if you stepping in carries with it a risk of you like vomiting out your mouth all your own programs. If you are triggered, and how for in myself, I always feel it come up from my belly, and it's just like this sort of wave that starts to take me. And I know before it gets to like the last cortical cell in my brain that I need to go to the bathroom. Like I just need to buy myself a minute to take a breath, to come back to center, to remember the truth of who I am, to remember the truth of who my child is, and then I step in back into life, back into the moment, and hold that boundary with firmness and with kindness in equal measure. When we can do that, then all is right in the world.
Mm. This is a very different perspective of discipline, certainly than most of our culture assumes it to be, than we experienced as children ourselves. I'm imagining a lot of parents who are choosing to uh, have their parental role be in this more conscious, connected, trust-based relationship, hear from a lot of people in their lives. You need to take his toy away. He needs to go
Mm.
in timeout. You're spoiling him. You're enabling him. What are some things that parents can say, or practices that they can embody so that they can stay centered? Because I think that's where a lot of the like back and forth comes, is we're not conditioned to trust ourselves,
Yeah.
especially if it's a parent judging how we're parenting and telling us what we should do, and we were raised to be a people pleaser. It's a very,
Asking for a friend.
I was like, this all sounds very familiar.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wait, was she fly on the wall in my life? Yeah. And so that people judge, and part of that is because they will experience discomfort due to their own programming when they see somebody else walking differently than them. There's a rub in that for them, especially if they're people close to us, our own parents, our in-laws, maybe even our parenting partner. There's a real rub for the people close to us when they see us doing it differently, because for them it means that they're doing it wrong. Not that we've said that, but their program will kick up, and that's what will be their experience, is that like, if we don't agree with how they're doing it, then essentially we're saying they're wrong. And so they will then have to defend, if they're going to go at it egoically, not because they're bad people, just because that's how humans work. They'll have to defend their position. And I think there's a couple of things. First off, we are here in the service of our children, not those other grown-ups. They're grown-ups. They get to go be in the service of themselves. So you don't, if you're like part of the International Codependers Club, of which I am like a founding member and president, you don't you don't have to be responsible for all the other people's experiences of things. We can we can let them be responsible and let them be adults and let them sort of figure out their own journey. The other piece is that the first act of war is not the attack, rather, it's the defense. And so, what's it like if somebody says, I don't think that's the way that you should be doing this? What if you didn't defend? What if instead you were like, yeah, tell me more? Or if you're not interested in hearing any more about it, it might be something like, you know, you might be right. And this is the way that I'm doing this for now. So it doesn't need to be, like, we can get curious about their point of view. We can see them and hear them in that point of view. In fact, most times, if we make it safe enough for them to really drill down underneath why they have this crusty facade of needing to hang on to, this old school way of doing things, if we're really present, usually what will happen is the you should be doing it this way softens into what is the fear that's underneath the and the fear is almost always born of a story that will actually bring you to your knees and flood you with compassion for that person. And when we can get there, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that's where the miracles happen and the shift occurs, and then you have somebody who's, able to walk consciously themselves. But you create that by not being in conflict with it. You create that by being in curiosity with it, and by being in connection with it. We don't have to make them wrong, and we can walk the way we want to walk.
It's tough out there for kids.
Yeah.
Anxiety, ADHD, depression, suicidal ideation, isolation, social media, screens, right? Like this is a tough
Yeah.
environment and moment in our culture to be raising children in. If someone is watching this and they have a child who is exhibiting high risk behavior, doesn't want to go to school, isn't engaged with life, what support could you offer that parent within the kind of context of this conversation that we're having?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say your number one focus, if that's what's happening in life or shades of that are happening in life, is to retreat to the environment and to understand that the number one influencer of that environment is relationship. And so we're always looking to understand, are the conditions around this child conducive to growth? And if they're not, then we need to back the bus up. We need to make sure that we have retreated to the foundation that we need to get settled. Everybody knows that the secret to a solid structure is a solid foundation. When it comes to our children, that foundation is relationship. Have we done everything within growth within ourselves so that we can be at the helm of the relationship? Have we done what needs to happen in the environment, maybe more concretely? Maybe there's a school change on the horizon. Maybe there's a pulling them out of this program because it's just not going well for them. And to not be shy about being really fierce in how you step in to create conditions conducive to growth. Like that's our primary focus. Too often, the challenges with the child become big and loud, and now we're into, anxiety and school refusal and panic attacks and eating disorders and rule breaking behaviors and blah, 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 all the things. And too often, our focus in that becomes the child. Like we're gonna put pressure there to try and fix this. So we'll send our child off to therapy. We will make bigger rules, have bigger consequences, all those things. So we're putting pressure on the child for this to morph. And I am a former child psychologist. I retired my license last year to do international parenting work. And even as a child psychologist for the last 12 years of my career, I haven't worked with children because our way through for the child is us. And when we can really understand that if we can get that foundation piece sorted out, everything else will fall into place. It sounds magical. And for the number of miracles that I have witnessed in children, like severely suicidal teens who are self-harming and things are really challenging. And I work only with the parent. And that child, who's been locked in their room for 12 months, like walks right out of that bedroom and into their lives. The power is within us. We experience the world as we are, not as it is. We see the world as we are, not as it is. We will create mirrors in the world all around us that are reflecting back to us what's on the inside of us. And so if we don't like the reflection, then we don't like smash the mirror. If we don't like the reflection, we change, what we're walking forward with.
I mean, this is why I started the Jai Institute for Parenting and why we train parenting coaches to do this work. Because, I have heard that word magical so many times, within like 3-4 weeks of just working on nervous system regulation and really practicing it, or working on emotional health and emotional intelligence, right? Being able to communicate what we're feeling without causing harm to ourselves or another. All of these skills build up, and then suddenly a child who has been misbehaving or isolating
Yeah.
magically reappears. We hear it all the time too, and it's just like, this is what I want the world to know. Like, it's like, let's stop saying the kids, it's the kids, they're so this, they're so entitled, they're so, ooh, like, oh, our parents said that too, and their parents said that too, and their parents said that too, and their parents said that too. So maybe let's be the parents who say, all right, discipline matters to me. Where can I demonstrate that more in my leadership?
That's right.
Using words that don't hurt matters in this family. Where am I not in alignment? with that value
Yeah.
instead of saying, say please, say thank you, in its most simplistic terms. Just you start saying please and thank you. And
You have, young adult children now launched off to college. Mine are 17 and 20. And I was never the mom to be say please and thank you. You must do this, you must do that, da 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 da. And I get to watch my boys now as they sort of walk closer and closer into that world of adulthood. And they're so grateful and they're so compassionate and so um, they're just big hearted humans who move through the world with such grace and such integrity that like I just can't imagine it any other way. And I love and I'm not perfect. I've had all my moments of blowing my family up and getting divorced and my children struggling and all of those things. So it's not like it's been this sunshine and roses path. And at the essence of that has always been the things that you and I have spoken about in this conversation. And I just love for the world to know, like, it can be that incredible.
yeah,
And sometimes, we read all the books and we do all the things and we've got all the plans and give me a script and the 3-step process to this and the 5-step process to that. And sometimes I just want for people to know, like, you're working too hard.
yeah,
That's not where it's at. Come back to here and watch how you create this really beautiful life from the inside out, not the other way around.
and then one day you get to experience in your own flavor what Vanessa just described is the most profound sense of fulfillment that you get to know these children
Mm,
that you journeyed with from birth
yeah.
or through their life. Um, the word that always comes to mind is with intimacy, and I know that's a word
Mm,
that we use for romantic relationships, but to like so intimately know your child and to see them walk through life as their unique, beautiful self. I mean, it's just like there's nothing better than that.
yeah.
Like we were talking before we started about, my kids about at college this year. I miss them. They are
Yeah.
my favorite people on the planet,
Yeah.
and I am so happy and excited for them. Like both
Right.
those things get to live at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm like, you go to that line dancing. My daughter's taken up line dancing. It's
I
her new
love it.
favorite thing. She lived in New England her whole life. She's like, people have a lot more fun in the South, Mom.
That's so great.
Yes. Vanessa, where can people find more about you? Tell us a little bit about, I know you have a membership for parents. Love to hear a bit
Mhm.
about that.
Yeah, I have a membership called the Dr. Vanessa Village because we're not meant to be doing this alone. My website, Dr. Vanessa Lapointe with an E on the end.com is where you can get all of that information. I'm also pretty active on social media. So Instagram and Facebook is normally where you find me hanging out. And I just love for parents to know, like, you have this, you really do. And the more that we can have community and journey together, the better for all of us, myself included. So hang out with your people.
Yes.
Find your people, and you won't have such an enduring experience of always swimming upstream. You get to rest in that community as well.
It's the beauty of social media is
Mm.
that, those of us on this uh, road of parenting, it feels, I think, way less lonely and isolating than it would
Mm.
um, without, being able to
Yeah.
talk to people like you.